So as an overview to Needham is a residential suburban community about 10 miles southwest of downtown Boston. So it's accessible to Route 128, which brings you into the city in about 20 minutes. So we are true suburbia over here. It's about 13 square miles and the population of about 30,000. So there's an MBTA, so that we have train access. It's all accessible by car, and there's a lot of mainly residential, but a couple parks and reservations within the town. So this slide's showing a little bit more about the breakdown of the town, which becomes important when we look at religious breakdowns, as well as imports, exports, things like that, and a little bit more of the demographics of our town, so you get a better idea of our age demographics, our racial demographics, and our professional demographics. So when picking two vulnerabilities that could happen in this town, I looked at the hazard mitigation summary. So this chart here looks at both Massachusetts and Needham. It looks at the severity of both Massachusetts and Needham of these events that could happen, as well as the frequency of it. So we're going to look at severe winter weathers, which happens 1.8 times per year and serious damage in Needham, as well as inland flooding, which happens 3.2 times per year with also serious damage in the town of Needham. So I picked those because they're the most frequent, most probable, and also the most serious in damage. So we could look at thunderstorms or high wind, which happens more frequently than the severe winter weather, but it has minor damage. We very rarely get a ton of damage through thunderstorms. So one of the big themes I'm going to focus on in terms of the culture of Needham is talking about how the history and the culture are actually intertwined. So for us, a lot of the culture comes from the historic roots of the town. Needham is a really historically rooted town in a lot of our buildings itself. We have a lot of old buildings. So our town hall, for example, is built in 1903. This is the first picture of it. And it's significant because there's a lot of history about how our town split into two, and this was our town hall, not the other town hall. It was updated in 2011 and kept a lot of the historic properties, which I think kind of demonstrates how our buildings actually reflect our culture. And that's the theme I'm going to carry through here. Again, you see the theme of our buildings actually reflecting our culture and our history as they change and grow. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the original high school, and then you'll see it grow and change. The bottom photos are the front view, and the top photos are from the back view. We've kept all the same historic properties while integrating into the more modern needs of the high school, and we're able to host a lot of things, and we're really proud of the fact that we have all this original architecture. We have those original poles in the front, the original tower on the top. So those are all things that are really culturally important because they're a landmark for us. The high school is our landmark. It demonstrates that this is our high school that we grew and continued to grow and took care of over all these years. Another important resource is that we have a very well-funded and well-supported historical society, and it actually is comprised of two houses that were moved from their original locations on the left to one central location on the right, and placed next to each other. So the first building's built in 1842, and the other one was built in 1834, and it's an inspiration to the adaptive reuse of historical structures, and that's where we actually keep all of our important documents as a town. It's very well-funded, well-supported, and well-interested by the town. I've never seen another town that has as much interest in their historical society as we do. That's a really unique feature, and that's something really cool about the history and culture of our town. The last cultural resource I'll talk about that we have in town is our variety of churches. So we only have 35.4% of non-religious population in town, and that's also assuming that everyone who completed the census filled it out accurately. And there's a lot of interesting conversation about, do people fill out the census accurately when it comes to religion? That's not for this discussion. But we have multiple churches. So St. Joe's, actually in the bottom right-hand corner, is one of our larger private schools in town. They are very well integrated in the community. They are sponsors for a lot of different events. Same with the Congregational Church in the top right corner, also really well integrated in the community. They do a lot of events. And the other two churches on the left have large venue halls, so they often end up hosting a lot of things, not even religiously related, but they host summer camps, they host things of that nature in their spaces. So they've become a huge part of the community, as well as a religious landmark for a lot of members of the community. So we identified that two of the vulnerabilities are based on weather as a town. That's because Needham is a really well-resourced town, and while we have other vulnerabilities, they're pretty isolated. So we have one large processing facility in town, but the pre-planning and there's the likelihood of something actually happening is so small. We're focusing on kind of the larger scale things that would have a more serious effect in the community. So looking at severe weather and inland flooding, it kind of has similar outcomes. We're talking about damage to property. We're talking about people being unhomed for either short or long-term periods of time. We're talking about businesses not being able to provide the services. All those classic weather-related storms issues. So how could these resources that we presented be important? So town hall in terms of recovery is going to be important for organization and logistics, so organizing where people are going to go. And the churches could actually be a part of the town hall saying, you are going to go to St. Joe's, you're going to go to the Congregational Church, and diversifying where everyone's going so that not one place is too overwhelmed. Our churches are not necessarily all centered in the center of town. There's a couple of them in different corners. So that would be a role of the town hall in conjunction with the churches. Same thing with the high school. The high school could be used for housing, either long or short term. The town hall could also help in the sense of recovery, of making sure all these places have the proper resources they need to actually help respond to a disaster. The Needham Historical Society is a little bit more of the wild card in this one. The Needham Historical Society would be really important in terms of preservation. So identifying and working with the town in the recovery efforts of, was there any historical buildings that were lost? And that's such a strong part of our community. The Historical Society would work with the town as they do with any renovation. If we lost any important buildings, if we lost any memorable or historically significant ones, how can they help with the preservation of them? Can we take part of it? Can we take all of it? Can we turn it into something else to signify the strength and resiliency after this event? We have a lot of towns and houses in town that are older that we'd like to keep preserved, and the Historical Society keeps a running list of all those places, so they keep their eye on them for any renovations. So in the case of a weather-related emergency and that vulnerability that we established, the Historical Society would be really helpful with that in conjunction with the town. So we kind of have the organization aspect of it. We have a little bit more of a secondhand knowledge and helping them out in the sense of the Historical Society, and then we have the high school and the churches as physical safe havens for people to go to if they don't have housing. The churches are also important in a sense of returning to normalcy based on culture, because churches can provide different religious leadership as well as non-denominational sense of leadership. That is a really important part of our community. As you can see, it's statistically significant enough that we should have these resources in town, and we do have them, and a lot of people do go to them. So having the churches be an integral part of our recovery and our return to normalcy, I think, is important based on the demographic of our town. Again, this might work for Needham, it might work for our town, but it might not work for every town, just based on the needs of a town.